In 2020, Democrats took full control of Washington.
And it will give Democrats control of the Senate.
Joe Biden has been elected.
But Republicans stood up in the states.
There was no blue wave. Democratic down-ballot disasters carried all the way to the state legislatures.
Now, we're the last line of defense against the Democrats' socialist agenda. The ways we're fighting back are bigger than you think. Welcome back, and thank you for joining episode 14 of It's Bigger Than You Think, a conversation about the politics that most impact our everyday lives. I'm your host, Annie Moore, and joining me today is Adam Kincaid. He's the executive director at National Republican Redistricting Trust, as well as Fairlines America. So, Adam, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So, for those who may not know exactly what both organizations do, can you just kind of describe the roles of both NRRT and Fairlines America and how they kind of are two different entities?
Sure. So we have kind of a group of organizations that are all affiliated together. So the National Republican Redistricting Trust is our flagship entity. It was created in 2017, and its job is to coordinate a 50-state redistricting strategy. And what that means is making sure that if there's a state legislator or a commissioner or someone else who needs in their states, we can help connect them with the people that they need to draw the maps that they need to draw, right? So redistricting is definitely a niche sort of function within American government. And so there's a very few number of people that have expertise in it. And what you find a lot of times is that people lack the networks needed to find the right people to help them do their job. So that's part of what we do. Fairlines America, our 501c4, is the data engine behind everything that we do. So Fairlines America's job is to build and facilitate a 50-state redistricting database. So gathering general, primary, special election data, precinct maps, all that sort of stuff. So it's very technical work at Fairlines America, but that's its primary function.
Okay, cool. That totally makes sense. And then the National Republican Redistricting Trust counterpart is the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. There are so many acronyms in politics, and that's led by Obama's former Attorney General Eric Holder. What are they doing to influence the redistricting process?
Sure. So the NDRC kind of took a very different approach when they founded, and they saw a vacuum on the Democratic side. They looked at the DLCC and they looked at a lot of the other groups, and they said, we can do this better. And so what the NDRC decided to do is try to play in legislative elections, governor's races, AG's races, secretaries of state, judges, all those sorts of things, right? And so they started that up in 16 and started engaging in these races. Their goal was to flip state legislatures, flip governorships, flip all sorts of things so that Democrats can have more control over the process. They spent tens of millions of dollars, over $100 million, I think, in 2020, and won nothing. So they flipped no chambers. They flipped nothing of any note that really changed the formula on redistricting. And so they came up short. So what the NDRC is doing now is they've got a different strategy. Their strategy is the same one that they deployed before, which is to sue to blue. Their job now is to bring lawsuits where Republicans draw lines in places where they don't think they adequately favor Democrats. You got to remember, the NDRC says that they're fighting for fair maps. They say that they're fighting gerrymandering. That's the only thing that they're doing is fighting Republican redistricting control. You know, the NDRC is an organization that on their own 990 says that they exist to favorably position Democrats for redistricting. And so what you can expect to see from them is that they'll show up in states in front of redistricting committees where Republicans draw the lines and, call for the, Republicans to draw maps that elect more Democrats. And when they don't do that, they'll sue. And they're going to sue no matter what. If you look at North Carolina as a perfect example of that. So North Carolina saw 17 lawsuits over the last decade over its legislative and congressional maps. And the NDRC was successful in getting North Carolina to redraw its maps for Congress and for state legislatures. The thing is, when Republicans redrew that map, Democrats picked up 2 seats in Congress. The minute that map was adopted, Eric Holder came out and said he planned on suing again because it wasn't good enough. So the reality is that they're going to keep suing over and over and over again until they get every single district that they think they're entitled to. And so if Republicans think that they can draw, a few districts that favor Democrats and that they're not going to get sued, it's just not true. Democrats are going to sue everywhere, no matter what. That's all they've got. They have no control. They have no ability to impact the process in most places. And they're going to try to sue to blue, just like they did last time.
For the states where they do have the ability to impact the process, we're already seeing some of the most egregious gerrymandering begin already this year in states like Maryland, Illinois, New York. How can Republicans fight the Democrats' narrative that they don't gerrymander when it's perfectly obvious that where they can, they will?
Well, I think Illinois is a perfect example of this, right? So Illinois has a rule where if they cannot adopt legislative maps by a certain date, a commission draws the maps of equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. They actually draw the tiebreaker's name out of Abraham Lincoln's hat. And so the interesting little bit of trivia for you there. So what the Democrats did, Governor Pritzker, when he was running for office, said that he would not sign any maps that were gerrymandered, right? Any unfair maps. He would veto all of them. So they're running up against this deadline. What happens? Legislature comes together, passes maps. They don't even have census data yet. They have data based off of something called the American Community Survey, which is what it is. It's a gigantic survey of the entire country and huge margins of error. So they draw the maps based off of that. And Governor Pritzker had a chance to veto that map. Number one, it didn't use real data. Number two, it was clearly partisan. And number three, he had promised to veto it, right? He said that he wanted a commission to draw the map. Governor Pritzker's veto would have forced the commission to draw the maps that he said he wanted to draw. And what did he do? He signed it anyway. So what we found is after those maps were signed into law, Republicans sued. And the Republican Senate and House brought a lawsuit saying that these were unconstitutional maps and that the commission should draw the maps. That's now being litigated in federal court. After the census numbers came out, the Democrats came back together and redrew those maps. We'll see if those stand or not. My argument would be that they shouldn't have had the ability to redraw them, that it should have been the commission should have been formed to draw those maps. But we'll see what the federal courts say about it. But that's how much of a hurry they were to gerrymander. They rushed to draw these maps before they even had the right data to do it and broke multiple promises in order to accomplish what they accomplished. So how we're fighting back, I just look at what's going on in Illinois. Republicans sued. That's not always been the case. A lot of times Republicans will, these maps will be drawn by Democrats and Republicans never really brought their A game. They never funded these lawsuits. They just kind of said, well, I don't like it and back down, right? That's not going to happen anymore. We're going to make sure that in the states where Democrats gerrymander, where commissions break the law, we're going to make sure that the folks that need to fund those, to bring those lawsuits, have the funding and resources and backup they need to do it and to be as successful as possible in bringing those lawsuits. So that's a big part of what we're doing. Another thing that we're going to make sure that we keep pointing out is Democrats' hypocrisy in all of this. As we get through this process, you're going to see more and more how Democrats say they're fighting for fair maps, but everywhere where they can have control, they're going to try to get as many seats as possible. And that's really what they're doing. Their job, when Democrats talk about fair maps, they don't mean fair maps that somehow are clean and pretty and everything else. What they mean by fair maps is maps elect as many Democrats as possible. Over and over and over again, that's what's very clear. They complain that a map isn't fair, not because it's compact, not because it's clean, not because it looks good, but because Democrats didn't get as many seats as they thought they were entitled to.
So New York has a supposed independent redistricting commission, but Democratic supermajorities in both legislative chambers are plotting to undermine the entire process and rig maps to eliminate 5 GOP districts in what the New York Times calls one of the most consequential shifts in power in the country this redistricting cycle. Eric Holder hasn't said a peep. What do you think about the hypocrisy of Democrats and their mission to undermine the voters' will by weakening the commission and gerrymandering themselves into power instead for the next decade?
Yeah, so this commission that exists in New York was passed on a bipartisan basis. Both sides got together and enacted these reforms. Governor Cuomo supported them openly. New York voters approved it. And then in the last 2 years, what we've seen after Democrats took control of the New York State Senate is they've done everything possible to undermine it and cause it to try to fail. They refused to fund it for a long time. They held back funding for over a year where they were trying to get up and running and get started. They passed a new ballot measure that'll be on the ballot this fall that makes it easier for Democrats in the legislature to gerrymander if they want to and ignore the commission. And then what we're seeing now is there's this whole drumbeat nationally, and from the new governor, from Governor Hochul, saying that somehow it's her job to make sure that Democrats have, that they pad their majorities. And that's not how this commission was set up. The commission was designed to be something where both sides came together and would work toward a compromise map. No one would get what they want. And Democrats say that's what they want. They want independent commissions to draw these maps everywhere, but apparently not in New York State. So, we're actively engaged there, making sure that, the folks on the ground are talking to the people they need to talk to, that they're showing up in front of these commission hearings, they're building a record and making sure that they hold Democrats accountable, trying to rush to gerrymander in New York, just like everywhere else.
Are these, independent redistricting commissions, are they generally independent, like Democrats are claiming that they are?
Commissions are a mixed bag. There's no two that are exactly the same. The rules are different everywhere, which is part of the problem. But the other part of the problem is that these commissions you have commissions that have Republicans and Democrats that appoint members to the commission. You have commissions that are independent and that they have citizens that sit on them, but they still have their own partisan bents. I think if you look around the country at the commissions right now, what you're going to find are that a lot of the independents tend to be liberals, that they have donated to people like Bernie Sanders, or they've worked for some sort of liberal campaign, but they qualify as independents because they've never been a member of the Democratic Party. The sort of rules that would mean that you can't be a part of it. But we see that everywhere. Michigan has 2 people on there that are technically independents, according to the commission, that are actually liberals that have worked for Bernie Sanders and supported him in the past. Donated and supported him in the past, I should say. So, these things happen regularly. If you go back a decade ago, ProPublica has a fantastic article about how Democrats gamed the California Redistricting Commission, how they engaged, went through, made sure that their maps were the ones that were adopted, and really gamed the whole system. And yet, all decade long, Democrats have held up California as the model for the country. I can't imagine why they'd want something that they gamed so easily to be the model for the entire country. But Democrats treat these commissions as kind of an arm of the Democratic Party. When they don't do what they want, they complain. When they do what they want, they say that it's a fair map. And that's how they treat these commissions. They think that they think they should be able to get the commissions to do what they want.
In Virginia, voters just decided that there should be an independent redistricting commission that draws their maps. We're already seeing these Democratic politicians using their role within the commission to promote, more Democrat seats and draw their own lines even. So according to reporting by the Virginia Mercury, a week after noting a consultant-drawn draft map would push him out of his district, Senator George Barker, a Democrat from Fairfax, he drew an amended map that shuffled just a few precincts, putting himself back in a Senate district with no other incumbents. How can these people be held accountable to draw fair maps instead of maps that are going to favor Democrats?
Yeah, so the Virginia Commission is the really interesting one. You've got your Republican legislators and Democratic legislatures on that commission, right? And if they can't agree on a map, then the Virginia Supreme Court's going to end up hiring someone to go and draw it for them. And so I think that Virginia is a very interesting one. I think that from day one, we've kind of viewed it as a commission that was conceived of that was going to fail just because of the way that they built it. I can understand where Senator Barker's coming from. He doesn't want to have to run with a lot of other people, but the commission itself voted to maybe and maybe not look at members' addresses. And they went outside of the commission structure, is my understanding, to go and do this and didn't do it within the commission itself. And so that's what's going to happen. We're going to see these games being played. Michigan is another spot to look at where yesterday they came out with draft maps for Congress and for different, I think the state House or state Senate so far. And immediately Democrats started howling, saying these maps don't give us enough seats in Congress. It had 4 Republican seats, 4 Democrat seats, and 5 competitive districts. Apparently that's not good enough. That somehow we need more than that. Democrats need more than that. So they're going to keep pushing for that over and over and over again everywhere. And so we have to keep pointing that out, make sure people realize that Democrats are trying to game these systems, and make sure that when we have Republicans on these commissions, that they're hearing from folks on the right, not just the liberals who show up. You find a lot of times that Common Cause and League of Women Voters and all those sorts of groups are the ones that drive people to go testify. And our side has been traditionally quiet on that. And so we work with folks in state to make sure that where that's necessary, that conservatives and folks on the right have the ability and the opportunity to go and advocate on behalf of their communities and not just watch them get carved up while Democrat communities of interest get held together to elect more of their people.
So what all is NERT doing to try to fight back against some of this liberal gerrymandering?
Sure. Number one, we're making sure that folks in the states have resources. If you're in a House minority or Senate minority, you may not have the resources that the majority has, right? That's pretty typical. So we do. And so we work a lot of times with different folks in states to make sure that they have the tools they need to propose maps, to fire back against these things, to bring lawsuits, to make sure that they have as good, if not better, data than the data that the left is using to draw these maps. Number one. Number two is making sure that when Democrats gerrymander, that we're holding them accountable, that we're talking about it. For a long time, Republicans just kind of sat back and said, didn't say anything about it. Somehow they thought if they were quiet about redistricting, that it would just go away. It didn't go away. And the exact opposite happened. So we push back against all those sorts of things. And finally, it's not just minority parties in some chambers. It's also in-state C4s and nonprofits and other things who want to engage, making sure they have the tools and resources they need. And so we do a lot of that sort of networking, helping connect people with the right people so that they can do their jobs in their states, right? So those are the big things that we're doing. But in the next few years, as we get through this, there's going to be a lot of litigation. We're going to be funding lawsuits all over the country. Democrats will as well. We're going to make sure that where Republicans have drawn maps that comply with the law, that they have the resources they need to defend those maps. Where Democrats have drawn maps that don't comply with the law, we're going to go on offense. We're going to bring challenges. We're going to make sure that everything they've done is brought out in the light, and that people have the opportunity to see what Democrats have done, why they've done it, and why those things are illegal and unconstitutional. Those are things that Republicans and folks on the right have not done really well and regularly before. We've just kind of let it go and been on defense, and that's not sustainable. We have to go on offense. We have to make sure our folks are defended, and that's what the trust is focused on doing.
What are some things that Republican elected officials can do to ensure fair maps are drawn, whether they're in the majority, minority, or they have an independent commission in their states?
Look, if you're a Republican elected official who's in the majority and you have the ability to draw the lines, follow your state's criteria if you have them, follow federal law, listen to your lawyers and draw the maps that you draw, right? That's it. It's really that simple. Just follow the law. As far as what to do if you're in the minority, if you're going to have fair maps, you need to make sure that you're holding Democrats accountable. Where you see them relying on information they shouldn't be using, point that out. If you see them drawing maps that break criterias in your state, point that out. If they're hiding things from the public that they should be making public, point that out. Call for it. Call us. Let us know that that stuff's going on. Hold them accountable. If you're on an independent redistricting commission, or that somebody is, or you have one in your state, you should be doing the same thing. These commissions are supposed to be transparent, and you should be calling for transparency. You should be looking to see if elected officials, particularly in states like Michigan and California, if the commissioners are talking to people they shouldn't be talking to, or if they're talking to them outside of their open records rules. Now, all those sorts of things are important. These commissions are supposed to be transparent, and when the commissioners are not being transparent, you need to make sure that they're held accountable. And that's something that I'm sure we're going to be seeing more and more over the next few weeks, and it's going to be a big part of legal challenges here too. I think Democrats, again, they like to say that California's process is somehow a model for the country. They gamed it a decade ago. If they're doing that again, I have every confidence that will come out in litigation over the next few years.
Okay, so this is my last question. What's one thing you would encourage reporters who are covering redistricting to ask Eric Holder about his hypocrisy?
I think reporters should ask Eric Holder if he thinks that Democrats in New York should gerrymander to their maximum ability. I think they should ask him if he thinks Illinois' maps are fair. I think they should ask him if Maryland's maps are a model for the country, as I've heard some of their academics talk about. Some of their academics say that Maryland's congressional maps are fair. if you look at Maryland's congressional maps, it looks like someone dumped a bowl of spaghetti on the state and traced around it. So I think that those are things that they should ask him, that they haven't asked him. And yeah, I think they should keep asking it over and over and over again.
Yeah, we got to hold him accountable.
Yep.
All right. Any final thoughts today?
Redistricting is going to be long. It's going to take months. We may not have our final maps until sometime in April, May, June of next year. Primaries are going to get shifted, and it will be fun to watch for all the people that are, big nerds and like this sort of thing. And so, I think for anyone who enjoys the political side of the stuff, they'll find redistricting fascinating if they haven't watched it in the past. I do want to just say one more time that Republicans out in the states, they need to realize that playing nice, drawing, maps that elect as many Democrats as possible, that's what you're still going to get sued if you do that sort of thing. Draw maps that, comply with the law, that meet your criteria, that achieve your objectives, and let that be the map.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Definitely appreciate it. Yes, glad you came on. And then thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. And always remember, state politics have an impact that is bigger than you think.